Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Sims 4 build video. Today I'm going to do the real life to Sims build challenge where I try to create this exact house in The Sims. And let's just jump into it right away. The hardest thing I feel like for this challenge for me was trying to figure out the right proportions, because one block in The Sims doesn't necessarily correlate to one real block, like square foot, in real life. So you kind of have to get fancy and fudge things a little bit to get the proportions right, which normally if I'm building, if something doesn't look quite right, I'll just completely change it or kind of do whatever I want. But with this type of challenge where I'm trying to make it look exactly like the photo, that's not really possible. So I had to get a little bit creative. I had to fuss with things for a long time. So I only ended up doing the exterior and the landscaping for this build just because it was so finicky to try to get things look like that. The video would have just been way too long. But if you're interested in seeing me do the interior, definitely drop a comment down below and let me know, and I can make a sequel to this video where I try to decorate it. But anyways, I had so much fun doing this. I think the upstairs is beyond like just the floor plan being challenging. Figuring out the right proportions of things for the upstairs was also really hard. And honestly, I did waste a little bit of time doing it because I initially wasn't planning, or I initially was planning on furnishing the upstairs and furnishing the whole build, and then it just took me so long to figure out how to make things look right in The Sims that I just decided to leave it out because I didn't have the time. And I don't know, I had a lot of fun doing this, although I was definitely let down by the blue roof swatches that are available. I have a lot of packs, and I still didn't have a blue roof swatch like the one in the picture, which was a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is. The other thing I realized is we totally lack a decent brick fence in the base game, or at least in any of the packs that I own. I don't know if any of you guys know of any good brick fences or any brick wallpapers that aren't just the base game too. I feel like we should have a lot more like half brick, half, like siding or paint foundation, or not foundation for wallpapers, and we just don't have those. So not really too surprised, but it is a little bit disappointing. I ended up DIYing a bunch of the windows and just like using single windows and then using move objects and alt cheats just to place them in the right spot, just because things weren't proportioned quite properly, and unfortunately you can't size up and down windows, so I did have to get really creative. The other place I had to get really creative was the garage. It was very hard to do, especially just with the proportions in the picture versus the scale I was looking at. I had to like resize room, and then I had to mess around a lot with terrain tools, which are something I don't usually use, to try to get the terrain to line up the way it is in the picture, where you still have stairs going up to the porch, but then you could drive a car into the garage so it's flat there. So that was quite tricky. And as I was doing this part, you can, if you remember back to the picture, it had kind of bricks partway around the siding, and I was really torn if I wanted to use those base game ones or not, because the picture didn't have those posts that are built into the wallpaper, and I really didn't want to use them. But then I felt like I didn't really have a choice. It was kind of a big part of the garage area, so I did end up putting them on eventually. The other thing I struggled with was what door to use. So again, we didn't have one that was exactly like the one in the photo, so I really had to look around and get a little bit creative with what to do. I had multiple photo angles besides the one that I showed you at the beginning of the video, so when you see me going back and like putting different types of windows in, it's because I initially thought it was like the ones on the front, and then I actually looked at my reference photo again and realized that that wasn't the case. So yeah, that's what's up with that. But I ended up using these laundry day doors just because I felt like it had kind of the farmhouse vibes. It had the white trim around the outside, and it had kind of a light brown wood, and I felt like that was about as close as I was going to get to a match, even though the actual door window looked quite different from the one in the picture. But yeah, and then the other thing was that like the spandrels were not really the right size, and I couldn't get they were a little bit tricky to get into place. And I was hoping to have like a fatter beam between the two columns, but there wasn't the one from Snowy Escape was just comedically large, and I ended up using the one from Seasons. The last couple touches were just to finish off the landscaping. So just putting a nice flower box in, and then using some terrain paint, and then putting in some plants. The plants also were surprisingly tricky given how simple it is, and that's just because we don't really have any normal topiaries. Like if you want a chicken topiary, we got it. If you want a weird one, we got it. If you want one that's shaped like a dog or a cat, we've got it. If you want just a normal, like standard twisty topiary, we don't have that. And maybe they're just in a pack that I don't own, but maybe we just don't have them at all, and it seems like a really weird lack to me. You can see here I'm going through all of my topiary troubles, and eventually I was like, I'm giving up on this for a second. I'm just going to place this like little cypress tree. But I was going to use this weird bush, and then I decided not to. And actually, I ended up scrolling through debug for a long time, and I cut that all out because it was just a lot of scrolling and a lot of me doing nothing. And then I ended up using these like potted topiaries from Get Together because they were just the closest thing. And then for finding the brick fence, I ended up scrolling through debug and then just using a bunch of the debug fences. And then I had to redo the columns, of course, because the columns don't have a brick swatch that matches the fences in debug. So I had to DIY some columns just by taking a pillar that you see me putting down here and then replacing the columns with a different column, putting the pillar on the bottom, and it was, that was a whole thing, but we got there, and I think it turned out pretty good. It's definitely not exactly like the photo, but I think it's about as good as we can get with the Sims 4 base game, or not the Sims 4 base game, but just with no CC. But I had so much fun doing this. It was definitely something that's a little different than what I usually do. If you enjoyed this video, you should definitely give it a big thumbs up. And also, you should totally subscribe. And here's a real life, and here is my Sims creation. Let me know how you think I did, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye, everyone.